Hello and welcome to TheFederal. I am Rajiv Ramachandran, joining you from Kochi, Kerala. Today we are discussing about the ongoing attack on Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces and its political fallout. Not the global repercussions per se, but the resonance it makes in a faraway state in India, which is Kerala. Kerala has a strong emotional and political connection to Palestine. This may not be entirely or essentially historical, but it's certainly political. Whenever there's a news about the conflict in Palestine, it elicits a sense of solidarity among Keralites for those who have lost their land, loved ones, and livelihoods. With the recent crisis and the ongoing attack, Palestine issue has once again become the central topic in Kerala's politics. The CPM-led Left Democratic Front, which is the ruling front of state, in Kerala have historically supported the Palestinian cause. And for the Congress, well, it's worth monitoring whether there's any shift in their stance in the changing circumstances. Today we have Dr. N.P. Ashley, a noted academic, cultural critic, and political commentator who is an assistant professor with the St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, Delhi University. Dr. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Palestine has been the eye of storm as far as the global politics is concerned. But right here in Kerala, the attack on Gaza in particular, is creating a serious political ripple. It's not about the Middle East geopolitics, but it's making waves in Kerala's local politics as well. It had shaped up to be a game changer with the Muslim League wavering its allegiance with the UDF and showing inclination towards the left. And even though the Congress has managed to contain them for the time being, it has caused enough damage for them, I guess. What's your take on how global politics can have such a impact in local politics like this in Kerala?
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. One interesting thing, one quick sort of thing that comes to my mind is one of the very insightful political commentators, Subramanya Das, who lost his life in 1983, in an article called Malayalis, Kerala is like Palestine. I mean, Malayalis don't have a place because they're all over the place. So, Keralites are a lost people. Our language, Malayalam, is losing its objectivity. That's his last lines in the suicide note. So there is this idea that people are all over the place, and then it's more of an idea. There's that idea that he talks about. So there is a new reality, and we don't know how to deal with. So that's just a metaphor that he uses. But what is interesting here is that it would be an important thing because of two reasons. One is the Gulf politics, that Gulf economy that's part of Kerala's sustenance as an economic model. And a second thing is the left politics that's very powerful. Right. The left rhetoric, left concerns. So if you look at the politics of the 70s, late 60s and early 70s, this is exactly around the time. 1968 is the year in which Palestine, as the word, till then you were talking about Jordanish Arabs and all of that. So it comes up with, the moment a lot of left, Cuba, Che Guevara, student movement. It's one of the legacies of the 60s. Which is basically 1967 to 1975. So that's one of the reasons why this works. And secondly, there is this ongoing economic interest. And thirdly, one of the most important demographic groups, one of the powerful community being the Muslim community, and the Muslim community's sort of understanding of the situation also matters. So these are the three sort of reasons why this is an important thing. Now, what I find interesting is the way in which Palestine gets discussed exactly in the same way, even after almost 70 years, right? I mean, if you take the 60s onwards, the global interest. because it's like a lot has changed. Global world order has changed. The post 90s 1989 situation is different, and a whole generation of people have been brought up in globalization. So you talk about globality now. In all of this, one thing that hasn't changed is the Israel-Palestine issue. And it is a very bipartisan issue. It is a polemical issue in Kerala, which is interesting because for a long time, just like in the case of India, there was this idea that Palestine is a very just case. There is a settler colonialism going on there. So largely people were anti Israel, pro-Palestine in Kerala largely for a long time. But now what one notices is that it's becoming a polemical issue, a bipolar issue, in the sense that it's becoming largely left and Muslim politics on the one side, and all anti-left and anti-Muslim sort of consolidation. Not necessarily because there is a love for Israel, but because there is an animosity about Muslims. So this has come up. Now that's one aspect. The other aspect is this entire issue is presented as a Muslim anti-Muslim issue also by the Islamists, because they are the whole conversation is like it's like the nuances or the details, and a lot of other things are not coming up, because it becomes, are you pro-Palestine, anti-Palestine? Are you pro-Israel, anti-Israel? The problem with this is a lot of silence has come up, because what's happening with the Arab world and the Arab politics and the recent developments in terms of the Sunni Shia fight, in terms of alliances between Israel and other Arab countries, all of that has been silenced now. So it becomes a particular kind of a symbol, a kind of a central point of arguing for or against something, which is actually both interesting and a very dangerous thing. It's interesting because people are so involved in global politics. It's interesting. It's dangerous because this is going to, the problem is that you are thinking of this is I'm with Israel because I don't like my neighbor. I am with Palestine because they belong to my religion. I mean, there's an undercurrent of that. Let's be very honest about that. But at the same time, there's a left legacy and a left tradition which has always been pro-Palestine. If you look at all the students' movements and the left movements all throughout, all over the world, it's been anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, also because of their anti-Americanism, right? So there is this whole major, and the problem I find here is that if this becomes a reason for hatred, for if it's part of an ethical, inclusive kind of politics, and we are talking about it because of our concern for inclusive, egalitarian politics and war crimes and all of that's one thing. But if you are finding this as a point, as a domain to advance our animosity, there's a huge problem. And I'm worried about this because exactly where Holocaust led Jews to, right? The Holocaust is the most, I mean, the worst tragedy in every way: ethical tragedy, humanitarian tragedy, awful political reality. But that was very soon, as Hannah Arendt pointed out, was used to justify Israel, justify Zionism, justify the kind of attitudes that Israel brazenly puts out. So, this kind of victimhood, this kind of, we are the victims, and, the whole world is against us, kind of a narrative, which is true of all communities in Kerala, dominant communities. We're talking about the Iravas, the Nayars, the Muslims, the Christians. These four dominant communities, these are dominant communities, but there is a certain way in which this uses, okay, this is all Islamophobic. This is only Islamophobia. I mean, there's a part of it. Let's be realistic about it. But at the same time, just to advance this argument, just to say this is how it is, it's not helping us, because it's not making us a better republic, a better people, a more inclusive people. So I'm a little worried about this, this being the conversation stopper, right?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
yeah. Actually, sitting here in Kerala and looking at the Middle Eastern politics, it has always had a notable impact in Kerala's local politics from the late 80s, even before that, uh, from that Iran-Iraq uh, war onwards. Like that. But the Middle Eastern politics has had a notable impact in Kerala. We can say it from the early 90s or the late 80s, from the invasion of Kuwait, the Iraq Kuwait war, and the American.
Mm.
This thing. And names like Saddam Hussein or even Yasser Arafat were as well known here to an average Malayali. We
Mm.
have, we have many Saddam Husseins and Yasser Arafat here in Kerala also. Why this has been a political phenomenon, this Middle Eastern politics taking a.
Yeah, I think there are two things to be thought of. One is, some people, there is, like I said, there is a certain idea of left and Muslim convergence that comes about in these zones, right? Which is actually also strange because Saddam Hussein was initially put up by America against Iran. Hamas is basically an Israel Netanyahu's construct Islamization of the Palestinian movement was a project, right? It's a stated project, just like the Mujahideen and the Osama bin Laden and all the rest of them. So there is a certain way in which in that phase, this origin story, the Genesis story, doesn't really get discussed. But once it becomes like Arindam Roy said, Osama bin Laden is a family secret of America. Hamas, for quite a long time, is a family secret of Israel. But then when it becomes against that, then there's a certain excitement around these people as resistance movement. So one point is that there is this idea of global American order, and there is a whole resistance argument. And this argument is fairly reasonable to me till 1979, not after that, because then again, as many of these people were brought in by America, and this Islamic fundamentalism or Islamist terrorism, a lot of it is a funded FBI project, CIA project. So this part is not really seen. What is looked at and what is like elaborated on is how they stand against Saddam Hussein, for example, the way he went to the gallows. It's really one moment that's often repeated in Kerala. And like you said, many people are named after this. So there is this. The problem is that, like if you look at Yasser Arafat and Hamas, what is the sort of how do we differentiate between these things? That's not very clear in Kerala at the moment, and that I think is an important problem. But at the same time, like the kind of conversations about terrorism is also one-sided, because the very state of Israel was born out of the terrorist attack on King David Hotel by Ingor, right? Because that was when Britishers had to leave, and the whole plan was sabotaged through a terror attack, as in what is called a terror attack. So the whole thing is, there's a certain kind of topical sensationalism, and in Kerala there's a dominant narrative. The dominant narrative is always anti-globalization, anti-American. It's largely socialist, but at the same time it's very capitalist in its behavior, its economy, its global economy, all of that, right? But at the same time, so it's interesting because of all these reasons. Like it's not just Kerala, because the way we are talking about Israel and Palestine is exactly the way we would have talked about it 70 years ago. That's not how you can talk about America anymore. That's not how you can talk about Britain anymore. That's not how you can talk about even China anymore. Because, America reeling under the impact of capitalism and China going into a certain kind of state controlled capitalism, these were unimaginable at that point. But when it comes to Palestine and all of that, it's the same story. And that story is a very powerful story, because there's a 70s nostalgia in Kerala, there is a left narrative in Kerala, and there is also this reality of this Gulf as a very next door thing, because a lot of people, I remember when we were children, people would even go to Iraq, right? And Gulf War, like you rightly pointed out, was a big thing, because suddenly mean, there was Iran-Iraq war, but it only had a limited impact. But the 90s really changed the whole situation because, lots of people were going in. And at that point, and Kuwait is a place where there's so many Malayali. So that's one aspect of it. But that doesn't explain away the political impact and the discursive power it holds. So I think it's a little ahistorical. It is not dealing with the historical changes, the immediate things, right? For example, we aren't talking about we seem to be there's this conversation about Jews and Muslims, which it is not. It just is not. Zionism and the Palestinian thing is a colonial hangover. It's part of continuing the Holocaust has been internalized by Jews, and they're doing it to they are now the perpetrators on the Palestinians, saying the same things Hitler would have said to Jews, like the human, animals, all of that is going on. And then the third thing is it's also part of an American policy which bombed, because Iraq and Afghanistan are two places where they know it just didn't work. They couldn't even eradicate Taliban, forget anything else. And look at Iraq. Now, after this, they've just destabilized. And we're not saying this. All the Republicans, including Donald Trump, are saying it was a mistake. But the same people are now saying Israel can do what just like America did to Afghanistan and or Iraq. Israel can do it because for 9/11 you can bomb Afghanistan. For weapons of mass destruction or an allegation you can bomb Iraq. The same thing is being done. So what I find is it's and then because this is a consolidated force on the one side, there is this argument that we need to be against them. So a lot of comments, a lot of hate comments are coming from people who have nothing to do with Israel. Their only thing is, this seems to be, I mean, like even in India, there is this idea that, India needs to do to its minorities what Israel is doing to Palestinians. I mean, that's
what I'm coming to.
Yeah.
The India's foreign policy. There's a shift in India's foreign policy, obviously after the 2014 election. And there's a visible pro-Israeli sentiment even in Kerala. So coming back to our backyard politics, even in Kerala, there's a very visible pro-Israeli sentiment growing in the urban and suburban areas, especially in Kerala. And it's driven by the BJP persons, obviously, and it's followed by a group of Christian, what do you call it, the organizations called Gaza and all. How is this going to affect the political dynamics? How do you think?
There are two kinds of things that I'm seeing here. One is because of Kerala's demography, Christians are going to be a very decisive factor. Whichever side can't get, the Christians can't be. I mean, the BJP can't do anything because with what 50% Hindus and a lot of left and all of that, there's nothing to consolidate there, and Muslims and Christians. So. And if Christians aren't with the Congress, they're not winning any elections. And if they're not with the left, they will also have a difficult time. So this Christian and there is a huge Christian-Muslim issue that's been going on. I mean, Love Jihad was basically a Christian thing. Some of the right-wing Christian, majoritarian Christian priests had a role in it, and there's a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric, just as much as there is a lot of anti-Christian rhetoric in the north, as an anti-migrant sensibility, like in our area and all of that, in Mukkam, these are all what is called migrant villages, where southern Kerala Malayalis came there, and they're seen as people who have come from outside, and so and just like in the south of Kerala, there's a lot of anti-Muslim thing, because it's also both a caste actually. One is the anti-migrant feeling, it is a kind of a xenophobia, and the other thing is like these are lower caste Muslims, and we don't have it in the so much in the north, because the Muslims are a powerful community. So this is a kind of a social shift that has happened, and all the collectives are trying to get hold of it. And so because of that, and one thing that is going on is that political parties aren't able to shape or engineer the discourses. They're following there. supporters. The support base is going here, so they'll go with that. That's the idea. So because of this, this is one of the reasons why the pro-Palestinian sensitivity or sensibility is understand, it's been there. But what is new is the anti-Palestine. It's not pro-Israel, it's anti-Palestine. Anti-Palestine extended to anti-Muslim, all of that. That has slowly come up, right? So this, if it can sort of be actualized in any way, this can really have an impact. There can be two ways in which this will manifest. One is left Muslim League moving more towards the left, and some Christian groups might be going out of the left. That's one possibility. And largely one problem is that there is, I mean, why are they, other than, the social engineering that they need to do and certain other questions, the fear or the threat of the BJP is seen as a very real thing. So it's a very dominant part of all parties' narrative, right? BJP tries to use the national narrative, it doesn't work. One, they don't have the organizational setup. Secondly, they just have that narrative in a state that's really hugely aware of its linguistic regional identity. This is unlikely to work, and they're kind of headless as a group. So there, if you could have this allowing a gravitation of Muslim League towards the left, it can actually change a whole lot of debates. And it might work like that. There has been some kind of a sense that it might happen, right? And in the largest national election, there is no other, everyone, like all left and Congress, and they're all together anyways. So I'm looking at, I'm thinking of a social sort of I mean, what is there already in the air will be consolidated as warring groups, as polemical points. And it might have a political impact. But Kerala's political parties are very powerful. So it's not like, a social drift will completely change things. No, because it's also important that they're very identified with their leaders and their flags and parties.
But actually, whenever there was a political crisis in the Middle East and a situation where the minorities are under stress, it often benefited the left in Kerala. So we have witnessed how the anti-CAA protests helped the CPM to come back to power. So in the way they had come back last time in 2021. So where is the Congress losing the track? What's their problem? Why isn't that party could not capitalize on these global political changes or adapt sort of?
Yeah. Congress, I think there is a problem because they are both a kind of a loose, diffused entity and like a powerful political party. They have lost the narrative. See, the anti-colonial nationalist narrative doesn't work now. It has gone, has become part of the Hindutva majority nationalist project. So it's very difficult. Second thing is so there's no story, right? And the second thing is Congress had a lot of left leaders in the sense that people who would talk liberal, like Nehruvian liberal values, and at sometimes, like, they would take certain positions in a certain way. Now that culture is not really very strong in the Kerala Congress, and also organizationally there seems to be, just like the BJP, there seems to be a difficulty, right? They're not able to put it together, and there is a certain way in which what is it that Congress can tell, which is different from the left in the Palestinian issue, right? That requires a lot of imagination to actually create a new narrative. If you're going with one narrative, then this is you're operating with the narrative, the global narrative that there's this is wrong, what is done to Palestinians. Hamas might be wrong, but that there is more to it. There's that narrative that has just become very ingrained, and like I said, if you don't have a political vision that allows you to create issues and define issues and define agendas, what happens is you end up working with what is available. There's a lot of laziness from all parties in terms of imagination, but in the terms of immediate responses from the Congress. So it's unlike, this situation is very, like you rightly pointed out, it's very unlikely to benefit the Congress in Kerala. It is, but the problem is what with the left and the Muslim League, what they need to be careful is that it should not be. It's an easy thing to capitalize on the consolidated entities, but it will lead to further communalization. So it should not be seen like that. It should be, there is a point about whatever is happening to Palestinians, right? So that's the problem. So that's my ethical criticism of this is if people are stuck with Hamas for these many years, there is a certain way in which the Arab leaders are responsible for this. America is responsible for this, and a lot of responses, and there are reasons for it. There is no looking into any of those things, right? For example, there is a certain way in which it's seen as a Shia thing, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran. The narrative goes like that, and the Sunni countries are actually silent other than providing humanitarian aid because of particular reasons, Middle Eastern politics and all of that. So there is a certain way in which there is no study, there's no understanding that's going into it. The problem is the kind of Hindutva majoritarianism we see also starts off other kinds of majoritarianism. See, it's not like in the space, where you're majority, you sort of exercise your own majoritarianism. So it's very important that all these not seemingly, actually powerful groups don't just buy into this narrative, a global narrative. So, for example, the Islamist narrative. Islamists are saying, oh, there is this, we are sort of, you can't have any criticism, any question of any kind. There's a whole narrative in the social media that you'll be shut up, you'll be just silenced. But there is no conversation about Ziaul Haq, who was the leader of the Jordan army, the biggest massacre of Palestinians being carried out on behalf of Jordan army by Ziaul Haq, who later then went and became a dictator in 1979, along with the American support, the America also supporting Maulana Maududi, right? So the radicalization and Islamization of every popular cause is an imperial project, be that American project, be that Israeli project. And what is Israel? It's a theocracy, right? You're talking about, and this is exactly the idea of a Hindutva country. This is the idea of an Islamist state. But how do we not go into those kinds of questions? Why are we just seeing Israel as this one single thing, and then there is a lot of emotional stuff going on? I'm not saying it's not important, but we should also be sensitive to the bombing of other countries, Yemen and all of that. That's also important. So it needs to be made more ethical and more inclusive and more honest. That's my answer.
But the narrative is being in Kerala, the narrative is being set up by the Jamaat-e-Islami-led identity Islamist organizations. But even then, the CPM has been able to garner this much of support from the total minority community, even though they are led by these Islamists of late.
Yeah, one thing is Islamists have they don't have any electoral presences in some panchayat wards. I mean, that beyond that, they really don't have any impact. They have some visibility in terms of the public sphere, right? And some of these ideas are popular. But the problem is, as the people, there are questions that and leftists actually managed to do this because, like I said, they're riding off on a legacy, and it actually works, right? Because it's not just because the left is doing it. This is exactly how Israel is operating. This is exactly how Arab countries are operating. This is exactly how America is operating. So it's not just, I'm not singling out the left narrative. My problem here is that there is a certain way in which these things, right, when we are working for justice, when we are thinking about people who have been, attacked, and this whole war crimes and all of that, this should make us more sensitive to our surroundings and our discourses, right? A hateful victimhood narrative will not take us really farther, because after a certain point, immediately this will come back. I mean, it's just like, whatever Israel is saying now, I mean, they might continue it for some more time, and it will come and hurt them. It will come and haunt them. That's how the world works, right? So the whole question here is the control over the narrative. It's easily the leftists managed it, because they didn't have to even manufacture it. It was there, so they just had to capture it, and that has been captured. And there is a certain way in which there is an uprising you're seeing, but that uprising should be sensitive to the concrete details, and it should be fair, it should be ethical, it should be self-critical, it should be introspective, right? Like, and because the problem with, like, Kerala's political discourses is that a lot of times they talk like college students who are very agitated, right? And the problem with that is, they look like they're in the middle of a lathi charge. So yeah,
Right.
it's you can't have discussions there, but most of the time we aren't in the middle of it. I mean, 99% of the time we are on social media, and the kind of emotional outburst, it's all true. I mean, if you're in college, in a university, and with, if you're in your 20s, that is how it should be, but not maybe later, because everyone seems to be joining that. So there is that's what I call it topical sensationalism, because this comes up. See, that's the other thing with Palestine. This comes up, and this, it's like a wave. It just comes up, and then it's all done, it's gone. There's no engagement with this. There's no later engagement with this. There's no understanding. I mean, I was actually looking at a lot of these things, and there's a lot of writings by Chomsky and Said and all that have been translated, but a lot of important Jewish writing has not been translated. A lot of these details are not available, because we are just repeating some of the arguments. I mean, Chomsky has a very valid
So we
point,
are
but we
we
do
are
the same
riding
thing.
on that wave
Yeah,
from 70s. So
yeah,
we are still riding on that wave,
yeah.
and I think the identity politics that is propagated by the Islamists and that's shaping up in Kerala, and CPM's engagement with it, CPM's and the total left's engagement with it, warrant a very detailed study. I think. Actually, Kerala is giving kind of new insights to that possibility with the Palestine question burning
Mm.
the background. And thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.